The massive Council warship Eternal Order hung in the darkness of space like a metallic predator, its sleek hull reflecting distant starlight. At its command center, High Commander Green, a tall being with iridescent scales, stared at the small human vessel that had wandered into their patrol route. "Curious," he muttered, his translator converting his clicks into standard Council speech. "It's not responding to our submission signals." The human cargo ship Lucky Star was barely 1/10 the size of the Council warship. By all normal protocols, its crew should have already initiated standard surrender procedures upon detecting such a larger vessel. Every species in known space had evolved this basic survival instinct, to submit when faced with overwhelming odds. "Send it again," Green ordered his communications officer. "Perhaps their receivers are malfunctioning." Inside the Lucky Star Captain James Miller scratched his graying beard and read the incoming signal for the third time. "They want us to what now?" His first officer, Tom Reed, shrugged. "Seems they want us to power down all systems and wait for boarding. Something about natural order and proper submission protocols." Miller laughed, the sound echoing through the small bridge. "Well, that's not happening. We've got medical supplies for the Mars colony, and we're already behind schedule." On the Council warship, Green's confusion turned to concern. The neural pattern readings from the human vessel made no sense. Where was the spike of submission? Where were the fear-induced surrender responses? The readings showed something entirely different. Determination, maybe even excitement. "Final warning," Green transmitted. "Submit or face consequences." Miller's response stunned the Council crew. "With all due respect, how about neither?" What happened next would be discussed in Council chambers for years to come. Instead of surrendering, the tiny human vessel cut its main engines. For a moment, Green thought they had finally submitted. Then the Lucky Star fired its maneuvering thrusters in a seemingly random pattern. "They'd gone mad," Green's tactical officer declared. "The stress must have broken them." But Miller knew exactly what he was doing. The Lucky Star had been built from an old Earth design, much more maneuverable than its bulky appearance suggested. Using the minimal gravity field of a nearby asteroid, Miller executed what pilots back home called a crazy Ivan, spinning the ship in a way that would have made most species black out. The Council warship's targeting systems, designed to track logical flight patterns, couldn't keep up. By the time Green realized what was happening, the human vessel had slipped through a gap in their sensor coverage and jumped to faster than light speed. In the following hours, Green had the difficult task of reporting this incident to Council headquarters. How could he explain that a primitive cargo ship had not only refused to surrender but had actually escaped? "Impossible," the Council elder said after hearing the report. "Every sentient species has surrender protocols. It's a fundamental part of neural development. Without it, they would have destroyed themselves long ago." Nevertheless, Green responded, these humans showed no such response. Instead, they displayed. He paused, searching for the right word. Defiance. The elder was silent for a long moment. "This requires investigation. If there truly exists a species without built-in submission responses, it could change our understanding of galactic civilization." Back on the Lucky Star Miller and his crew celebrated their escape with coffee and laughter. "Did you see their reaction when we pulled that turn?" Tom asked, grinning. "Bet they'd never seen anything like that before." Miller nodded, taking the sip from his mug. "Something tells me they're not used to smaller ships saying no." Well, they'd better get used to it if they're going to deal with humans. Little did Miller know, but his simple act of defiance had set in motion events that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. The Council had discovered something they never expected, a species that didn't know how to give up. And this was only the beginning. Senior Investigator Blue moved through the Council archives like a living shadow, his fluid form shifting as he studied the holographic displays. As one of the galaxy's foremost xenobiologists, He had been given an unusual assignment: figure out why humans didn't surrender. "Display human combat history," he commanded. The air lit up with thousands of battles, wars, and conflicts from Earth's past. What he saw defied everything he knew about species development. When facing superior forces, humans often fought harder instead of submitting. The pattern repeated throughout their history: smaller forces defeating larger ones, surrounded armies refusing to yield, lone defenders holding against overwhelming odds. "Most peculiar," Blue muttered, his watery form rippling with interest. "Computer, show me Earth's evolutionary predators." The display changed, showing Earth's prehistoric creatures. Blue noticed something immediately. Humans hadn't evolved as prey animals. They had been persistent hunters, neither apex predators nor cowering prey. They had simply endured. Investigator, his assistant, a crystalline being named Spark, entered the archive chamber. "The neural scans from the merchant ship incident have been analyzed." Blue's form condensed with attention. "Show me." The scans appeared in the air. Where other species showed clear submission responses when faced with superior force, a survival mechanism as basic as breathing, humans showed something else. Their neural patterns actually intensified. They became more focused, more determined. "Fascinating," Blue said. "They don't just lack surrender protocols. They have something else entirely." His investigation led him to study more recent human activities. He found recordings of a human mining colony that had been attacked by raiders. Instead of surrendering their resources, the miners had turned their industrial equipment into weapons. The raiders had retreated in confusion. Another report showed a human research vessel trapped by a solar storm. Rather than accepting their fate, the crew had reconfigured their shields in a way that defied safety protocols, surviving what should have been certain death. Council Member Gray, Blue addressed the holographic projection of his superior. "I believe I understand why the submission protocols failed." The ancient council member's metallic face showed no expression. "Explain." "Humans never developed surrender protocols because they never needed them. Their species survived by outlasting threats, not avoiding them. When faced with danger, they don't submit, they innovate." "Impossible," Gray responded. "Every successful species must know when to yield. It's essential for social order." Blue's form rippled with excitement. "That's just it. Humans maintain social order differently. They have something they call cooperation, voluntary submission based on mutual benefit, not instinctive response to superior force." "Are you suggesting this makes them stronger?" Gray's tone carried concern. "Not stronger," Blue corrected. "Different. While other species avoid conflict through natural submission, humans developed complex problem-solving abilities. They don't submit because they're always looking for another option." In his private research chamber, Blue compiled his findings. The implications were staggering. A species without surrender protocols should have destroyed itself long ago. Instead, humans had turned this apparent deficiency into an advantage. He recorded his conclusion. Humanity's lack of surrender protocols is not a flaw in their development, but rather an evolutionary adaptation that encouraged creative thinking and technological advancement. When faced with overwhelming force, humans don't see inevitable defeat. They see a problem to be solved. The council received his report with a mixture of disbelief and alarm. Some members suggested humans should be contained before they disrupted galactic society. Others saw potential benefits in their unique perspective. As the debate raged, Blue made one final entry in his research log. "In our effort to understand why humans don't surrender, we may have discovered something far more important. A species that shows us there's always another way. The question is no longer why humans lack surrender protocols, but whether we were wrong to think such protocols were necessary in the first place." The council chambers buzzed with discussion. No one noticed the small human transport ship that passed by their station, its crew going about their business, blissfully unaware that their very nature had just challenged thousands of years of galactic understanding. The investigation was complete, but its impact was just beginning. The grand meeting hall of the Intergalactic Council sparkled with crystalline lights, its high ceilings designed to accommodate species of all sizes. Today, it would host the first official diplomatic meeting between Earth and the Council. Admiral Jack Thompson led the human delegation, his weathered face and straight posture reflecting his 30 years of space service. With him stood 4 other humans, including Dr. Mary Wells, Earth's leading xenobiologist, and Ambassador Robert King. "Remember," Thompson whispered to his team, "we're here to establish peaceful relations. Keep things simple and friendly." At the center of the hall, 12 council representatives sat in a circular formation. Their forms varied dramatically. Some were crystalline, others gaseous, and a few looked almost liquid. Council Leader Prime, a tall being with shimmering silver skin, rose to speak. "Welcome, humans," the universal translator conveyed their words. "Before we begin formal relations, you must participate in the traditional submission ceremony. All new species do this. It ensures proper order." Thompson blinked. "I'm sorry, the what ceremony?" "You will kneel before the council," explained a blue crystalline being, acknowledging our authority. "It's a simple biological response. All species understand this." The human delegation exchanged glances. Ambassador King stepped forward, his diplomatic training kicking in. "Perhaps there's a misunderstanding. We're here as equals to discuss mutual cooperation." The council members stirred uneasily. One of them, a gaseous form contained in a transparent field, pulsed with agitation. "This is most irregular. The neural compliance signals are being broadcast. Why aren't they responding?" "Look," Thompson said firmly but politely, "we're happy to show respect, but we won't kneel. That's not how we do things." The council chamber erupted in murmurs. Leader Prime raised all 4 hands for silence. "This is unprecedented. Every species submits to superior numbers and authority. It is natural law." Dr. Wells stepped forward. "If I may explain, humans don't have these automatic submission responses. We make conscious choices about when to cooperate." "Impossible," declared a crystalline council member, rising suddenly. Their form began emitting intense pulses of light and sound, a display that would have triggered immediate submission in any normal species. Instead of dropping to their knees, the humans merely squinted and covered their ears. "Would you mind turning that down?" Thompson asked, his tone showing mild annoyance rather than fear. "We're trying to have a conversation here." The council chamber fell into shocked silence. The display that should have forced instant submission had been met with a request to lower the volume, as if it were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Leader Prime's silver skin rippled with confusion. "You truly feel no compulsion to submit." "We feel lots of things," Ambassador King explained patiently. "Fear, respect, caution. But we choose how to act on those feelings. Humanity learned long ago that blind submission often leads to disaster." "Then how do you maintain order?" asked the gaseous being. "How do you prevent chaos?" Thompson smiled. "We talk. We negotiate. We compromise. Sometimes we disagree, but we find ways to work together because we want to, not because we have to." Dr. Wells added, "Our strength comes from voluntary cooperation, not forced submission." The council members withdrew to confer privately. The human delegation could hear their agitated discussions even through the sound barriers. After what seemed like hours, Leader Prime returned. "This is highly irregular," they announced, "but perhaps interesting. We will dispense with the submission ceremony, just this once. However, we must study this strange trait of yours further." "Study all you like," Thompson replied with a friendly grin. "But let's do it as partners, not as superior and inferior species." As the formal discussions finally began, news of the incident spread throughout council space. A species that couldn't be forced to submit, that chose cooperation over compliance. The implications were enormous. In his private quarters that evening, Thompson recorded in his log, "First contact could have gone better, But it could have gone much worse. They expected us to bow down automatically. Instead, they learned that real respect has to be earned, not forced. Maybe that's the most important lesson we can teach them. The diplomatic incident was over, but its effects would ripple through the galaxy for years to come. The human mining colony of New Hope wasn't much to look at. Just 50 pressurized domes on a rocky planetoid, housing 300 colonists. It was exactly the kind of target the Black Void pirates usually preferred. Small, isolated, and supposedly defenseless. Colony leader Robert Wilson was working in the main control room when the warning came. 3 ships dropping out of faster-than-light speed, his assistant Anna Baker reported, her eyes fixed on the scanner. Pirates. Black Void markings. The pirate fleet was infamous throughout this sector. Every other colony they'd attacked had surrendered immediately. It was simply what happened when faced with superior forces. "Send the evacuation signal," Robert ordered, but his next words surprised the control room staff. "And get everyone to their defense stations." The pirates' first transmission came exactly as expected. Their leader, a massive reptilian being known as Steel Claw, appeared on the main screen. "You know how this works," he growled through the translator. "Submit and give us your resources, or we'll take them anyway. You have 10 minutes to lower your shields." Robert looked at the screen calmly. No. There was a pause. Steel Claw blinked all 4 of his eyes. "Perhaps your translator is malfunctioning. This is not a negotiation. We are stronger. You will submit." "Yeah, about that," Robert replied. "We're not going to do that. In fact, we have a counteroffer. Leave now, and we won't have to hurt you." The pirate crew visible in the background actually laughed. Their ships outgunned the small colony 10-1. The idea that these miners could hurt them was ridiculous. What the pirates didn't know was that humans had been busy since settling on New Hope. The mining equipment hadn't just been used for digging ore, it had been modified. Industrial lasers had been repurposed into defense turrets. Drilling machines had been converted into makeshift tanks. Every piece of equipment had a secondary purpose as a weapon. 5 minutes left, Steel Claw announced. "Submit now." Instead of responding, Robert turned to Anna. "Are the miners in position?" She nodded, a small smile on her face. "All 30 drilling teams ready." They're actually excited about this. The pirates never saw it coming. When their ships moved in to take the colony by force, the surface of the planetoid erupted. Mining lasers, designed to cut through solid rock, sliced through their hull plating. Drilling machines, their hardened tips replaced with explosive charges, launched from hidden tunnels beneath the surface. "Impossible." Steel Claw roared as his ship's sensors registered attacks from all directions. "They're just miners." "Correction," Robert transmitted back. "We're human miners. There's a big difference." The battle lasted less than an hour. One pirate ship was disabled by the modified mining lasers. Another crashed after its engines were crippled by precision explosives. Steel Claw's flagship retreated, smoking from multiple breaches. In the aftermath, as the colonists celebrated, Anna found Robert in the control room, reviewing the damage reports. "You know," she said, "any other colony would have just given them what they wanted. It would have been easier." Robert shrugged. "Easier isn't always better. Besides, can you imagine telling our kids we just gave up without a fight?" News of the battle spread quickly through Council space. The small mining colony had not only refused to surrender to the notorious Black Void pirates, but had actually defeated them. The Council's diplomatic office was flooded with requests for information about human defense strategies. In his report to Earth Command, Robert wrote, "The pirates made a simple mistake. They assumed that because we were outnumbered and outgunned, we would give up. They didn't understand that humans don't think that way. We don't see overwhelming odds as a reason to surrender. We see them as a challenge to overcome." The Black Void pirates never returned to New Hope. In fact, they began avoiding human settlements entirely. As one captured pirate later explained, "It's not worth it. Other species submit when you show superior force. Humans, they just get creative. And angry, especially angry. On New Hope, life returned to normal. Mining, building, and improving their defenses. Just another day for a human colony that didn't know how to surrender. In the Grand Research Center of the Intergalactic Council, dozens of the galaxy's brightest minds gathered around a holographic display. The image showed a human child trying to solve a puzzle box and failing repeatedly. Watch carefully. Professor Light, a luminescent being, instructed his colleagues. This is where it gets interesting. Most species young would give up after 3 or 4 failures, accepting their limitations. The human child, however, kept trying. 10 attempts, 20, 30. Each failure led to a new approach. Remarkable, whispered Dr. Glow, another researcher. Their neural patterns show no submission response to failure. Instead, each defeat increases their determination. The discovery had started a revolution in galactic science. For thousands of years, the Council had believed that knowing when to submit was crucial for survival. Humans proved otherwise. In another lab, researchers studied human history. The timeline of their technological advancement stunned everyone. While other species progressed steadily through careful, safe steps, humans took wild leaps. They shouldn't have survived, muttered Research Director Stone, his crystalline form flickering with confusion. Look at this. They developed powered flight, and barely 70 years later, they'd reached their moon. That's not just fast, it's reckless. But it worked. Somehow, it worked. The biggest breakthrough came when young Council scientist Ray decided to try things the human way. Instead of accepting traditional engine limitations, Ray pushed past safety protocols. The result? A 40% improvement in efficiency. Don't you see? Ray explained to the stunned Council board. Our submission protocols don't just affect social behavior, they limit our thinking. When we hit a barrier, we instinctively accept it. Humans don't. They see barriers as challenges. News of these discoveries spread quickly. Young scientists across Council space began adopting what they called human thinking. Research that had stalled for centuries suddenly moved forward. One afternoon, Professor Light called an emergency meeting. We've been analyzing human entertainment, he announced. What they call fiction. Look at this. The holographic display showed scenes from human stories. Tales of impossible victories, of heroes refusing to give up, of success against overwhelming odds. They don't just refuse to submit to reality. Light explained, his glow brightening with excitement. They imagine ways reality could be different. Then they try to make those imaginings real. In the medical labs, Dr. Pulse made another startling discovery. Human healing rates increase when they're told something is impossible, she reported. It's as if their bodies refuse to submit even to physical limitations. The Council's younger members were fascinated. Some began practicing human-style problem-solving. Instead of accepting traditional limitations, they asked what if. Instead of submitting to authority, they questioned and explored. Not everyone was happy about these changes. Elder Council members worried about the breakdown of proper order. This human influence spreads like a virus, one complained. Soon, no one will know their proper place. But they couldn't argue with the results. Research stations using human methods made breakthrough after breakthrough. Medical facilities that adopted human-style determination saw higher recovery rates. Even space exploration advanced as pilots learned to think beyond traditional safety margins. Professor Light summarized the findings in his report to the Council. Humans haven't just shown us that surrender protocols are unnecessary. They've shown us that the ability to reject limitations, to refuse to submit to impossible, might be the most powerful evolutionary advantage we've ever encountered. In the research center's main hall, they installed a new display. It showed 2 quotes. The first was the traditional Council motto, "Note your place in the order of things." Below it, they added a human saying that captured their revolutionary discovery. The only impossible journey is the one you never begin. Young Council members would often gather around this display, discussing their latest projects and dreams. They had learned something profound from humanity, that the universe wasn't just a set of rules to be followed, but a set of challenges to be overcome. As one young researcher put it, the humans didn't just lack surrender protocols. They showed us that maybe we never needed them in the first place. The scientific revolution had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The warning came without fanfare, a simple sensor reading at the edge of Council space. The swarm was coming. Ancient records spoke of these beings from the galaxy's outer rim, a species that consumed everything in their path. The last swarm invasion had happened 10,000 years ago, before humans even had written language. Captain Lisa White stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Defiance watching the Council emergency session through the holographic display. Hundreds of species were panicking. The swarm's fleet outnumbers our combined forces 5-1, announced Council Leader Prime, their silver skin dull with despair. Our simulation shows only one logical response: surrender and hope they spare some of us. Lisa stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. Permission to speak. The Council chamber fell silent. Humans were still newcomers to galactic politics, but their reputation had grown. The simulations assume we'll fight conventionally, Lisa said. But what if we don't? Explain, demanded Leader Prime. Lisa's fingers danced over her console, projecting a new tactical display. The swarm expects submission when they show overwhelming force. Every species they've encountered has surrender protocols. But we don't. In the following hours, Lisa laid out a plan that made the Council members uncomfortable. It violated dozens of safety protocols. It ignored basic survival instincts. It was, in their words, insanely risky. It was also the only plan they had. As the swarm approached, the Council fleet appeared to be in disarray. Ships fled in all directions, seemingly panic-stricken. The swarm, sensing victory, split up to chase them. That's when the trap was sprung. The fleeing ships weren't running away. They were leading the swarm exactly where Lisa wanted them. Each human captain had picked their battlefield carefully, using astronomical features other species considered too dangerous to navigate. Commander John Reed led his pursuers into an asteroid field, where his smaller ships could maneuver, but the massive swarm vessels couldn't. Captain David Park used a pulsar's radiation to mask his ambush. Lieutenant Maria Torres turned her ship's supposed retreat into a slingshot around a gas giant, achieving speeds that made the Council observers gasp. Impossible, muttered a Council tactical officer, watching the battles unfold. They're violating every rule of space combat. Exactly, Lisa replied from the Defiance. That's why it's working. The swarm, for the first time in their history, faced an enemy that didn't behave according to their expectations. When they displayed overwhelming force, instead of surrender, they met stubborn resistance. When they expected retreat, they found ambush. When they thought they had won, the battle was just beginning. The turning point came at what would later be called the Battle of the Dying Star. Lisa had positioned the Defiance near a highly unstable star. When a third of the swarm fleet cornered her there, she did something that horrified the Council observers. She fired at the star itself. The stellar explosion created a shockwave that destroyed most of the swarm ships. The Defiance, having calculated the blast radius down to the millisecond, rode the wave like a surfer, damaged but alive. You risked everything on that maneuver, Leader Prime told her later. If your timing had been off by even a second. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save everything, Lisa replied simply. The remaining swarm forces, faced with an enemy they couldn't predict or understand, finally retreated. The Council's analysts were stunned. The species that had never known defeat had been driven back by the species that didn't know how to surrender. In the aftermath, Lisa wrote in her log, "The Council thinks we won because we had better tactics or because we were braver. But that's not it. We won because we're the only species crazy enough to try impossible things and stubborn enough to keep trying until they work." The council chambers, which had once debated whether humans were too dangerous to join galactic society, now rang with praise for the species that had saved it. Humanity's surrender deficiency had turned out to be exactly what the galaxy needed. As Lisa watched the celebrations from her battered bridge, she smiled. Sometimes, the greatest strength came from what others thought was a weakness. 1 year after the Swarm's defeat, the Intergalactic Council looked very different. The grand circular chamber now included a new section, the human seat, marked by Earth's flag showing blue and green against the stars. Admiral Jack Thompson, the same man who had once refused to kneel in this chamber, stood before the assembled species. Behind him, displayed on the massive screen, was the official Council declaration. Humanity's lack of surrender protocols is hereby reclassified as adaptive persistence, an evolutionary advantage. It's funny, Thompson began, looking at the diverse gathering of beings. A few years ago, you thought we were broken because we didn't know how to give up. Now you're making it official policy. The chamber erupted in the various sounds of alien laughter, from crystalline chimes to rumbling vibrations. Leader Prime, their silver skin now bearing the scars from the swarm battle, raised all 4 hands for silence. We have learned much from humans. Your species has changed us in ways we never expected. The changes were visible throughout Council space. Training academies now included human-style problem-solving in their curriculum. Research stations encouraged scientists to challenge accepted limitations. Even the youngest species were learning that submission wasn't always the answer. Professor Light, now head of the Council's new Innovation Department, presented the latest statistics. Species adopting human methods show a 300% increase in technological advancement. Medical breakthroughs have doubled. Space exploration has entered areas we once thought impossible. But the most significant change was in how different species interacted. The old hierarchy, based on natural submission to superior forces, was giving way to something new, something more human. We used to think order came from knowing when to submit. Council Member Blue explained. Humans showed us that true strength comes from choosing when to cooperate and when to persist. In orbit above the Council station, the human ship Defiance had been transformed into a museum. Captain Lisa White, now an instructor at the Council's Space Academy, often took her students there. The ship's battle-scarred hull told a story of determination that inspired species across the galaxy. The funny thing about surrender protocols, Lisa told her diverse class of alien cadets, is that they're really just another way of saying this is impossible. Humans never developed them because we never accepted that anything was truly impossible. In the medical wing, Dr. Wells worked with alien doctors, teaching them about the human concept of fighting spirit. Patients who were encouraged to resist their limitations rather than submit to them showed remarkable recovery rates. It's not about being aggressive, she explained to her colleagues. It's about believing you have a choice, even when everything says you don't. The Council's military doctrine underwent the biggest transformation. The old protocols, based on careful calculation of superior force, were replaced by what they called the human factor, the understanding that determination and creativity could overcome seemingly impossible odds. As the ceremony concluded, Thompson shared a story. On Earth, we have these tiny creatures called honeybees. When their hive faces a threat that's too big to fight, like a hornet invasion, some species simply submit and die. But our bees do something different. They gather around the invader and vibrate their wings until the heat they generate cooks their enemy. They win by doing something nobody expected. He smiled at the assembled council. That's humanity in a nutshell. We look at impossible situations and think, well, has anyone tried this yet? The council officially adopted a new motto that day, displayed prominently in every chamber. Submission is a choice, not a destiny. As the various species filed out, Leader Prime approached Thompson privately. You know, they said, when we first discovered humans lacked surrender protocols, We thought it was a dangerous defect that needed to be contained. Thompson nodded. And now? Now we understand that the ability to choose not to surrender isn't just a human trait. It's the future of our galaxy. You didn't just survive without surrender protocols. You showed us we could all be better without them. Outside the chamber windows, ships of all species moved through space, their crews learning to face the unknown not with submission, but with determination. The galaxy had changed, all because one species never learned how to give up. And that was just the beginning.